Boys don't become men simply by getting older. They must be shown the way. They must be initiated into manhood by other men. They need brothers. The world may be collapsing, but God is raising up good men to raise good men. It's one of the great God movements of our time, and you can be part of it. On the Dragon Slayers podcast, we interview ordinary men with extraordinary tales of conquering their fears and becoming fearless, loving men of God. Through their stories, you will hear rich wisdom, practical advice, and the value of brotherhood so you can stand out as a man among men. Warning, we will not mince words. We believe soft men and soft advice slay no dragons. So prepare yourself like a man. This is the Dragon Slayers podcast.
My good friend Wes Kotys, thank you so much for joining us here on the Dragon Slayer podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you being with us. You typically, you're wearing a suit and you are looking good. I got to say, you're looking good, man.
Thank you.
I got a couple pictures of you though. Probably the first picture I have of you is you're dressed down a little bit, and there you are, right there. There you are. Over there on the left. That's Wes actually, without his suit on. That's
different kind of suit.
Yeah, yeah. The other picture is you and Ben and Shane, kind of just standing out in the middle of a field in Kodiak Island. It's kind of like you are just hoping to not see a bear or something. Yeah. I don't know what's going on that day, right? And when Ben, this is on the heels of Ben's Slayer story, right?
It was the next day, I think.
Yeah, there you go. And then you went fishing, and you got a nice little halibut there. Yeah, there he is.
Yeah.
This is your other suit right here. This is the other suit that Wes wears.
Wes is currently holding a 45-pound halibut in this picture.
45 pounds. He's
such a fun
45
experience.
pounds right there.
Yeah.
Very cool. And then oftentimes outside of that, you're a Zodiac captain that is leading the troops to shore to invade once again. Here we go. Onward, men. Onward, upward. All those were our Kodiak. Well, not the first one was our Alaska pick. Mm-hmm. But all that aside, you are a business guy. Look at you. Tell us about what you do for work.
Sure. I have an investment management company, also a wealth management company. And today we have a team of 6. We also have a 7-person investment committee. We run 24 different portfolio strategies for our clients. We have about 300 clients all over the country and manage hundreds of millions of dollars for individuals and families and endowments and institutions and corporations. I have the privilege of working with my wife, who is our CFO, and my brother is a financial advisor with us. I didn't really set out to have a family business, but Sarah, as an accountant by degree, and myself, we've built something that we've become very proud of. But before I started this company in 2007, I started with a big brokerage firm in my early 20s. And and when you're 21, 22 years old, and I hadn't even finished my college degree at that point, but I started knocking on doors and trying to have 25 meaningful conversations a day with people in order for them to understand that I felt like I was really purposed and called to be an investment management person, even though I had no money and didn't know anybody with money. And and so it was kind of in some ways it was a tough pitch. It's nice in those early years, you do have big companies backing you and things like that, but you still have to build trust with people. And that, I would say, knocking on 6,000 doors over probably a 1 year period of time. Eventually gathering about a little under, call it 40 or $50 million of assets from people who decided to trust what I was about, what we were about. And that was a very humbling time, because knocking on doors in a suit, people wonder, are you a Jehovah Witness? Are you a preacher? Are you a politician? What are you?
Vacuum cleaner?
Oh, worse. I'm an investment manager,
Worse.
Oh, so
Funny.
that's back in 1999 to the early 2000s, just trying to get something off the ground, and then quickly became one of the fastest growing offices with a big brokerage firm, one of the fastest growing offices in the country. But I would spend as much time as I would spend knocking on doors during those periods, I would spend on my face in prayer. No kidding. I had an assistant in an office at one point. I'd be on my face in prayer, and she was a faithful person, but did not quite understand. She's like, shouldn't you just go talk to more people? But I knew
Wasted
that
all this time on the floor.
exactly. It's exactly right. And I got that from a lot of people. It's like, what are you doing? But I was doing the work. But the Lord honored that work, both from the folks whose doors I knocked on. That He did honor that, but He also, back then, Sarah and I would say, fish would jump in the boat from the other side where we weren't even fishing in, simply because, and we knew that was because we were on our face in prayer. We were scared. I didn't finish my college degree at that point in time. Since then I have, and all these, initials that go after the name and all that. But Sarah and I met during this period, and knew we were going to get married. And, so I wasn't just trying to like start something. I was trying to have enough money to go, treat my future wife the way she should be treated. And so we were scared, we were hungry, and we were full of faith. And we could talk maybe another time, but we were full of faith because of how we met and what God did there first. But so we start this, start by door knocking, go from zero to a little bit of something. And in 2007, we start Kotys Wealth Professionals. Sarah was an auditor with the state of Indiana at that point, and we came together, decided we want to work together. We love it. I always say, couples, you can either work together or you can't. And if you can't, don't. But when you can, it can really build synergies. And we've really never looked back, and are looking to really move from something now to something greater, and back on our faces, actually asking the Lord, what does that look like? Because at this point, we don't need any more money. It's like, what's your why? What are you going to do, and why, and where are you going to put your efforts? So we've since built a little bit of a real estate business and a real estate management company, and been a little bit more entrepreneurial, but couldn't have done that without being on our face in those early days.
Awesome. Wow. Such a great story.
I want to key in on something, because one big reason we do this podcast is for men to learn how to be men from other men. And I bet you there's young men listening, and your 20-something-year-old Wes is knocking on doors,
6,000 doors,
knocking on 6,000 doors. So he's, like you said, you're putting the work in. At the same time, you also have the deep conviction to be on your face in prayer. You might have alluded to a little bit earlier, but can you say more about where does that come from at that early on in your life? Where does that type of one, like, I should be doing this, and then where does the conviction come from to actually see that through? Because there's something powerful about that.
Yeah, that you're knocking on these doors, and there's mornings where I'd pull into a neighborhood and drive around for 2 hours looking for the perfect spot to park. And I just, if I park here, well, that doesn't seem right, and really what's happening there is fear.
Mm-hmm.
Like fear of getting out of the car. At some point, you got to go get out of the car, you got to walk up a driveway, you got to knock on a door, you're in a suit. My first 6 months were in freezing cold weather. And, which ended up being the best because, the older folks would have you in the house because you looked like you were freezing, and
I mean, sweetie.
you at least could have a conversation once you got one step in the door,
How
But-
miserable can I look to get invited in? That's a good tactic.
Why don't you have a shirt on?
But it's humbling to get out of that car, and so you're overcoming in that moment, and then you put a full day in, and I would try to have 25 meaningful conversations, and then I would send thank you notes that night. And really, I wasn't selling anything. I was just saying, here's what I'm up to. Thank you for spending a little bit of time with me. Can you please keep me in mind if you're looking for an investment advisor? What you realize, though, is that 25, even though you're trying to have 25 meaningful conversations a day, you might not have anybody get back to you. And it's a very inefficient business model if you think about it. And I would say that just going to the Lord was just out of, in some ways, both fear and faith of like, is this going to work? It's not going to work without you. It's not going to work without you, Lord. But we knew where to run. And, we would just reach out to the Lord on our knees, on our face, and just say, we know where we're supposed to be. We're doing what we're supposed to do. Please honor and bless what we're putting our hands to. And he did, day in and day out. It was pretty spectacular.
I just got one more follow up because it's touching on something for me personally. When I first, I grew up in the church, and I first came back to the Lord at 23 because my then girlfriend was pregnant, and I was going to be a dad and have to go out. And I remember going like, there's answers in the Bible, and I started learning about faith. And the thing that you carry so well, knowing you now for the last few years, is my number one question when I was trying to learn how to be a provider for my family was, Lord, how much is it faith in me just trusting you, and how much do I need to get my butt out there and go do something? And you're talking about both things so well. Can you just talk about your balance a little bit more? I just want to keep pressing into this topic of faith, and I'm gonna go do something about it.
Yeah, I think even when I mentioned, you're over there fishing, I'm over there fishing, knocking on doors, and then there's fish jumping in the boat, people that I didn't even directly talk to, people who I did knock on their door, kind of reaching out early on. And there's really no good theory as to why they were doing that. It wasn't necessarily referral business. It wasn't, you couldn't put on anything else. And so Sarah and I have always put that as to, if you're not on the water fishing, there is no chance for a fish to jump in the other side of the boat, and
Come on.
And so I believe strongly that we're supposed to, for a period of time, for a season, when if we're setting off on an entrepreneurial venture or starting something new, there's the vision of it is usually there. You see your end game. You have you have no idea how many valleys you're going to go through. But once you see the vision, it's like a commitment to put your head down and say, I'm going to do whatever it takes on a daily basis to get to that vision. Then you're going to go through the highs and lows, and you better have bruised knees at that point, because you're probably going to need them. I think that's where the willingness, and God knows if we're actually doing it or if we're going through the motions. But I do think there's got to be a healthy balance of what we do versus what he does. Quick tangent, just recently I was convicted, I'm talking within days, where you get to a place like, now I have, my visions are different. We're creating a new 5-year plan. We have all these new goals, and I have team members that have goals of their own, right? And I found myself thinking, and probably some of it's true, I could actually make some of those goals happen for them, or I could actually make, I know enough now, I can make some of this happen. And I found myself actually moving forward without even thinking about getting on my face in prayer. And I think that's the danger, right? We could either go one or the other, depending on this season. It's like, I got it from here, Lord. You got me to this point. I'll take from here. That's ridiculous. That doesn't work. We know it doesn't work, but we do move ahead at times, and then we get a little banged up. The other side of that is, Lord, if it's really you, you're going to do it. As you're sitting in your recliner, and that doesn't work either.
Nope.
You got to get in the boat. It's so good, Wes. You're hitting on something. Just even with Christian's questions here, I keep thinking about we have a couple experiences now in Alaska, and we describe these Alaskan men as these guys that just don't quit. They have this thing about them. Like, we get out there in some hardship or some weather, and what's wrong with these men? They just don't quit no matter how hard it gets. And that's kind of the experience we have, and how we describe those weird men out there in the cold. And but the way you're describing what you're talking about, it's the same thing. It's just in a different place and with a different application. But it's this: I'm on mission, and there's this thing the Lord's given me, and this vision that we're going after, and I'm not going to quit. Connected to my devotion and dependency on Him, I don't quit. Like, I'm not sure there's more to say about that. I'm just noticing there's this theme that keeps coming up that I'm so inspired by, encouraged, and probably even convicted myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't a question. I just want to point it out. I'm just saying.
You're just saying that was good.
You can comment on it. It's amazing.
No, I agree. And God will give us certain levels of pain individually in what we're going through, that others don't even feel. And I'm thinking of the picture behind me, which is Denali, which is where we were nearby in that first picture you showed in the snow machine outfits and helmets. For some of the guys on that trip, the difficulty level was less than 1 out of 10. They take their wives there on a weekend. And for some of us, that was a 10 out of 10.
11
difficulty. 11.
It was 50 for me, dude.
Yeah.
But you gotta. We each have to kind of battle through.
Such a good word.
Those moments, and when you're together, it certainly helps, right? It's tougher when you're alone. It's just you and God, but there's a synergy when you're together that overcomes some of the fear. But I do think finding that balance in whether it's in a business environment or on a mountain in 30 below weather or whatever that was, it was ridiculous. You got to find the both, right? You can't just get off the snow machine and pray on your face. You're going to freeze to death.
Yeah. Frostbite.
Going back to the 1 out of 10, 10 out of 10. I don't know if it was that river, but on that machine trip, there's a part where we're going and we go on this ice. Yeah. And I'm like, what are we on? Like, oh, you're on the river.
Frozen river.
You're on a frozen river, and the water underneath it's still flowing. They're just, and so like they don't prep you. The Alaskan guys don't prep you for like how to think about these things. So like I realize we're on the river, and then of course there's cracking that happens. You hear it.
The ice is moving.
The ice is moving. This is very normal to them. They've grown up.
A river.
No one told me about it. So all I know is I'm on top of a river and I hear it cracking, and I'm going, I'm hoping my life is with these guys. I'm hoping everyone feels and knows this, and we're not just going to plummet into the bottom of this frozen river.
And that's water on the ice coming from the river.
It's horrible.
Yeah, what did we do?
It was awesome, but scary.
That was 5 days of that.
That's what made it a 10 out of 10. Right?
Yeah, that was a 10 out of 10 for me. Hey man, if you're wondering what it takes to be a dragon slayer, you're going to want to get Danny's new book, The Way of the Dragon Slayer, 7 Reasons Men Need Brothers. Inside its pages is going to be rich wisdom and practical advice on what it means to be a man of virtue and restore masculinity in our time. So go to dragonslayers.co, that's dragonslayers.co, and get your copy now.
Yes, you have a beautiful family. You and Sarah, I mean, you mentioned a little bit about how you guys met and got together, and I know that it was a big deal having a child finally. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about that journey? And I'm specifically, steering towards that moment when you were alone again.
Mm.
You were working it out.
Okay. Yeah. So Sarah and I were married a number of years before we had our son, Dominic. We were married young, and for the first few years of our marriage, we're not necessarily trying to have children, but we knew we wanted children, and maybe even thought we would adopt on top of having our own children. And as we started, we just knew it was time. Sarah was ready to have a family. It became evident that it was not going to be as easy to have children as we thought. So it went a number of years, I don't know, close to 10 years, I think, before we were able to have Dominic. During the last couple of years of that, Sarah was, I would say, fairly tormented. Like, it was tormenting to her that she could not have a child. It got to the point where she's like, why would you even want to be with me? We can't, and we're best friends. Our marriage is, sometimes marriage is a lot of work. Ours is, that's not our story. We got married young. We're best friends. We love one another. It's been fun, exciting. And then we can't have a child. And she's literally, tormented. I just hurting, in pain, not herself. We start looking at medical scenarios, trying to figure out what's wrong with us. Doctors didn't find anything wrong with either one of us. Everything was fine, so on and so forth. Then you get into, we had this wonderful Jewish doctor who was encouraging IVF, and just, such a calming influence. And we had some, I guess, religious issues. I wouldn't call them kingdom issues. I would say, like, is this good? Should we do this? We had influences in our life saying that's no good. That's not of God. I'm talking about, looking down medical avenues. And so that added to the torment. We had people somebody told Sarah that she couldn't have a child because she was in sin. And it's like, what's sin? Like, just kind
so
of
helpful. So
yeah,
so
right.
wow.
It's your worst moment. It's like, would you just pray for me? But so that was such a difficult period. And we got to this point where we were Sarah's pregnant, and that worked. Is such a miracle. Her pregnancy was probably the best time of her life. She loved being pregnant. It was such a healing moment for me, because I was carrying this weight of just watching my wife not have what she longed for. And both of us wanted the same thing. And so, such a miracle. She loved being pregnant. We walked through that so lightheartedly, best time of our life. Got to the point where Dominic was ready to be delivered, and Sarah wanted to have as much of a natural birth process as possible. We had a doula, still in the hospital, but she didn't want an epidural. She didn't want these things. So we get to the hospital. Dominic's not wanting to come. They have to induce. It takes another 3 nights. We have 3 sleepless nights. They finally really encourage an epidural. They couldn't figure out what was going on. She goes into delivery. We didn't have family there. We just wanted to have our son by ourselves and enjoy this. We were here. We're at the end line. And anyhow, he's delivered. They lay Dominic on her chest after removing the umbilical cord from his neck twice, which they didn't like. It was a little bit much. They put Dominic on for Sarah to hold, and then Sarah turns purple. She loses about almost 60% of her blood volume very quickly. The placenta, when they pulled it out, was not fully detached. Next thing I know, they're handing me Dominic. There's 20 people in the room. They send her down to ICU. She doesn't remember this. I remember this. She looked dead. She looked dead. Now I'm holding my child and watching my wife get carted off. And all this happened very quickly. And then they go to grab Dominic, and because he had some esophageal issues with the umbilical cords, so they grab him for a minute. And I'm in this room by myself, and I don't have family there. Sarah is not conscious. My child's over here. And I just had this moment with the Lord. And I felt, I actually didn't sense God there. Probably one of the first times or only times in my life. Like if I was getting a sozo ministry, I wouldn't, where's Jesus? I have no clue.
It's a great question.
I have no idea where the Holy Spirit is in this moment. I felt alone. And I said to God, I said, God, I don't want to trade my wife for my son. This was not a trade. We prayed for these moments. Now, I also knew it's in his hands, right? You still had to pray with an open hand, that which is probably the hardest thing to ever do. But I said, this was not a trade. They both got to come through here. This is our family. And I cried that out probably a half a dozen times because they put me in a room because they wouldn't, I was so tired and so concerned that the nurses would take Dominic in shifts. And, so we went into this thinking, okay, we're at the end, our son's going to be born. And now we're fighting for life again. And I was tired, sleeplessness, man. That's a tough scenario on its own, but also tired of fighting for this particular battle and then not willing to lose, like win one and lose another. That's not what this is about. And the Lord really made himself known. I would say after that moment, it's like I almost had to cry out in order to sense him again, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And you weren't shy about it either, right? You were like, I heard you describe it as, I don't care who hears me.
Oh yeah. It was top of the lungs. This is not a trade.
Yeah. Wow. This is not a trade. Wow. Wow. Well, we saw a picture of your beautiful son, who is 9, 10? How old is he?
He's 10.
He's 10. Yes. What a family.
So sweet.
What a family. Yeah.
What a story.
You guys are top shelf for sure. And I know what a treasure your family is to you. Mm-hmm. And I know that you live as a man faithful and focused. And I'm asking all our guys, I'm asking the same question. Like, what would you say is the most valuable contribution you make to Sarah?
I think at times she would say the most valuable contribution I made was Dominic as the result. Something we've said to each other since the time we met is, and I would tell her, I said, I love you every second. And even starting early on, I didn't really expect anything back. And it's something now we'll say to one another just as a remembrance of our commitment to one another. And not too deep, but just not veering off. I think it a little bit aligns with, when you have a vision for something, it's got to be worth it every day, every second. And, I would tell her that a lot when she was kind of in that, I really mean that, like that tormented state of just feeling miserable about herself because her body can't do what it's one of the main things it's supposed to do in life. And I would just tell her, I love you every second, don't, we're not backing off of that. We'll figure this out. But I guess we have a lot of fun. We have a lot of lightheartedness, but just that ongoing commitment is hopefully the biggest contribution I've made.
Yeah. You're doing a great job, buddy.
Yeah.
You are doing a great job loving your woman.
I think there's so many stories that I've heard from Wes over the years and things we probably can't even share on here and don't have enough time for it. But Wes, I think one of the standouts about you is just the man of character that you really are. And that's not some nice saying that we say. That there really is such deep character that you carry on. This is who I am because this is the way God sees me, who He's called me to be. And I think it's a standard that we need so much in men today. So it's such a standout thing you carry so well. And
Thank you, Ben.
every story you've shared is just reiterating that same thing.
Yeah.
Just the way you carry your family, the way you carry yourself. Even down to thank you letters to people that didn't give you anything. There's little moments. It's amazing.
Thank you.
That's my in hearing you when your greatest contribution to your wife. Love you every second, and you talked about this commitment, and you've had fun moments, but in the times where she felt unlovable, where she wanted to press you away, you pressed in. Where did that come? You said it started early, and I guess I'm always after like the origin of where did you learn this? Where did you learn that your greatest contribution was going to be your unrelenting commitment to your wife in all moments, down to the second? Is that something that you were taught, or you saw, or you were trained in, or you just came upon? Like, how did that happen? Because that's we need husbands like that.
Oh, all right. You want to open this can? Here we go.
He does.
Yeah. Sarah and I, we met. Our church was a vineyard church. I had been in church most of my life, high school and college. To say I veered off would be an understatement. I almost ruined any chance of what I'm doing when I was in college. Just bad behavior. That character, I actually knew what I had in me in high school, but didn't live it out for a few years, we'll say. But Sarah and I met at a youth retreat. I had just graduated high school. I'm 4 years older than Sarah. She was either just turned 17 or maybe still 16. Sarah got saved at that youth retreat. She also got delivered from addiction, and she also got healed of a couple of things. And I fell on my face. I wept and shook on the ground for hours separately from that. Sarah was outside with some of the women youth leaders. I was there as one of the younger youth leaders. That was how our youth pastors were kind of bringing me back, But Sarah and I both got up separately. When we saw one another, we knew it, and we know this now. We didn't know this together at the time. I knew she was going to be my wife, and she knew I was going to be her husband. She had a boyfriend. I had a girlfriend. We were not living purely at the time. When we got back from that retreat, one of our youth leaders asked me to take her home. And I tried to get out of it. First of all, I had this car that was such a piece of junk that I did not want to take her home in.
What was it?
It was a Chevy Nova. It was my brother's car.
Okay.
You could almost pedal it through the floor.
Flintstone.
Yeah.
See the
But
road
man,
go
it's
by.
a manual shift, anyhow. On the way there, I'm taking her home. I said, the Lord did something. She's like, yeah. She's like, you want to say? I'm like, no. I think you say. I'm older than her. I didn't, this is. But the short of it is, we kind of inched our way through a discussion on what the Lord did, and I made her say it first, but she's like, I think we're going to be married, and I said, I know, and I mean, what God did in those moments was so real and so thick, and this was like, I don't know where you're going with this video, Danny, but this is one of those places where the glory cloud fell. Like, there was so much going on. There's so many miracles, and so I think the short answer, Christian, is that was it learned? No, it was it was certainly bestowed upon us in that moment as a gift, and then a radical healing. We both went home and broke up with the people we were dating. We then courted for 3.5 years in purity. So we didn't have that. We weren't, necessarily pure from day one, from up until that point. But from that point on, I mean, God, he did what he did. He didn't mess around with us. And we know that's unique. It's not everybody's story, but that is our story. We would tell that story to people for years, and our friends would just get saved hearing the story. And there was just power on it. And so I think, was it learned? No, it was known how we should be behaving, but then the ability to do that came with the love that he kind of put in each of us for one another.
Yeah,
That's good.
Wes, no wonder so many people want to give you money. I mean, you are just the most stellar character human.
Yep.
It's just so fun to listen to you talk and to realize the absolute quality that you have protected, because a lot of people get this kind of opportunity. They get this kind of the Lord shows up and does something amazing, and then they just piss it all away with dumbness, selfishness. They just screw everything up, and it's so sad. It's so sad. And but to hear your testimony and to see where you are and to know you as a man of God is just such an honor. I'm so inspired. I'm just so inspired listening to you and seeing your face and knowing you, and not 1 ounce of, oh, that's a bunch of crap, he's lying. It's everything I hear. I just I didn't know that about you, or I just love this about you, or everything. It's just so much fun to listen to you. Thank you for doing a good job.
Seriously.
Oh, buddy. Hey, I know that going through all that with Dom, and I've heard you say several times, Sarah doesn't remember any of it. I had PTSD after going through that whole experience, and I know that early on there's a protective father. There's I don't want my child to get broken, that you had to come to terms with, and you had to figure out what to do, and what happened there, and then what would you advise as a father to a son? What is so important to you that you are teaching Dominic?
Yeah, these are good points. I talked about really not sensing God for a minute there when Sarah was down in ICU and that whole thing was happening. I didn't realize until Dom was mobile, and when he was 2, he fell down a couple of stairs and he broke his leg. And at that moment, I realized that, while he wasn't as mobile, I could control things a little more. As he was becoming more mobile, I'm realizing, hey, I got this free spirited little boy here, and I'm watching him, and throughout most of my life, I would say I've been a risk taker, and whether it's in sports or in business or in other adventures, been a risk taker, and yet I was finding myself almost like a helicopter parent with my 2-year-old, especially after he had a cast all the way up to his hip, and kind of a freak accident type of thing. Shouldn't have happened, but it did. And you go to one of those doctor's offices and you see 40 little boys like that, and it's not like he's the only one in there. But I just started to realize I had this protective thing over me. It wasn't my usual help him take risks, show him how to do it with some calculation, or it was more of a just, he's my only one and I'm scared. I hadn't dealt with the trauma from birth and what happened with Sarah. And Sarah didn't have to deal with it because she literally doesn't remember it. And so all she remembers is holding Dominic on her chest. That was her last memory. And then next thing you know, they're together. And so there's a couple days in there that it was just me. And I hadn't dealt with that. I hadn't dealt with that fully. When he did break his leg, I think I was forced to just go to the Lord, and the Lord showed me that he was with me through others. The doctor who delivered Sarah, she's one of the only doctors in our part of the country that had ever done one of those. She had that before. And the other one that she had was with her partner, who's another doctor. And so after that happened with that other doctor, they studied it and they knew what to do, which is why they moved so quickly. And I was friends with the CEO of the hospital. When he heard that was Sarah, he put all hands on deck. And this nurse who saw the look on my face kind of helped take care of me for the next couple of days. Like the Lord began to show me where he was in those moments, and then just kind of help me pull back the onion as to, the type of father I wanted to be was fearless and kind of a leader of a young man in character and in all these areas that we're talking about in life. And I was kind of shutting it down each step of the way. I've since, I would say, been I've moved on from that. That trauma is not necessarily as rampant. It creeps up every now and then where I find myself saying, be careful a lot. And it's like, okay, this is not who you are, But I guess if I had words of advice for other fathers of boys, for me, I mean, Proverbs 22:6 is train him in the way that he should go. And that seems so simple. And yet, having one son who now loves baseball, for example, he didn't like baseball. Now he loves it. I love baseball. And I was like excited to help him and coach him. And he was 3 years old. He said, or almost 4 years old. He said, Daddy, I don't want you to coach me. I want you to encourage me.
Mm-hmm.
And Sarah was there. I'm like, wait a second. I mean, he does articulate. He's always been able to articulate his emotions pretty well. But he kind of said that for a period of time. And now that he's 10 and he's playing this travel ball team, he still would rather show me what he's learned than have me be the coach in this part of his life. And the Lord just showed me something I already knew, but I was a little bit kind of, you get a little bit hurt. Well, you're my only son. I want to help you. I know this stuff. I know the game well, But you remember, excuse me, and that's what the bond that we have as men, even on some of these trips, you need one another. And so, it's not just dad who trains him up in the way that he should go. It needs to be dad, but it's all these other fathers who have something to offer, and they will grab that sometimes faster than they'll grab it from me. And it's reminding me then to want to be that type of father to my friends' children, because they're going to accept it from one of us and maybe not another. My son we have a mutual friend, all of us, Craig in Alaska. My son has been to Alaska a number of times, and he knows Craig's the guy for the kind of mountain man stuff that we do. He doesn't ask me about that stuff. He waits a couple of years until he's going to see Craig next time.
That reminds me of it's so good. Like we're talking about, being around brothers is so helpful and men make other men. And so you're talking about part of this is like, I surround myself with quality men because they're also going to help me raise my son. Yeah. I have an awesome father-in-law who's amazing with cars. And to contrast my upbringing, my dad sprayed Pam on our brake discs on a trip to Oregon because they were squeaky. We get there and the mechanic's like, you could have lit your car on fire, So it's like I meet my wife, and so like we send the boys, to man camp some summers in the week, and they spend a week in my father-in-law's shop learning, what's an engine, what's an alternator, what's all these things, and it's so helpful. But there's there's something you said in there that I kind of want to do a little PSA on, because you captured it. And as a dad of 3 boys and a coach, I coach a lot of sports, and I've not done a great job at times. So practice kid number 1, my oldest, Josiah. Sometimes when your son's out there and you want to coach and teach and instruct, what I had to overcome or get through was my anxiety of his performance reflects my ability as a father.
Yep.
And what I didn't know early on is that he, as anxious as I was feeling, he felt that double, because he was anxious about what he was doing out on the field. And then he was anxious about letting his dad down. And so thankfully I have great men around me and worked through that with God. And I got to a point even where another coach approached me one year and said, "Hey, how is it that you're so relaxed and comfortable around your son? You guys look like you're having such a blast. I get so worked up with my kid." And I go, "I know, because I was that. And I'm going to tell you now, don't do that." So PSA, if you're coaching your kid, Wes said something. Your son might not need coaching from you at the moment. He might just need you to encourage him. He might need you to take a step back and not give him all this feedback, instruction on what he can do differently, but just praise him for what he's doing right and just be his number 1 fan. And unfortunately, we see, coaching basketball and football, and I see the opposite with a lot of kids and a lot of dads out there, and it's heartbreaking, because you know right away when a kid is, here's a tell if you're doing this. If you coach your son and you're wondering if this is you, if after every time he does, the pitch goes by or a play happens, if he turns and looks to find you, whether you're in the crowd or coaching on the sideline, you're doing it wrong. You need to back off for a second, because he is so in his head about pleasing you and performing for you that he's not actually having fun playing the game. So Wes, I just want to say thanks for bringing up that point, and another stellar example of how you're such a stud. Doing a good job.
Yeah. Bill Johnson, at his dad's funeral, he made this statement. He said, "This man was my greatest encourager." And I heard that. I think I had just gotten married. We didn't have kids yet. We have 3 now. When I first heard that, I wrote it down somewhere, and I thought, this is going to be the legacy that I leave for my children, is that they'll say the same thing at my funeral one day.
Yeah.
So just hearing you say that, Wes, it just reminds me of, like, this feels like the call of a father.
Right.
Is I want to be the greatest encourager in my kid's life. That this is the legacy I leave, is there was no one else on the planet that could touch my heart the way my dad could. It's just, man, you did it again, Wes.
That was good, Ben. Good stuff.
Well, Wes, thank you so much, man, for just being a quality human, but a man of God and just a great leader and a great friend. I remember calling you and asking you if you would join me on this journey of Dragon Slayers, and you told me, my heart's been crying out for this. I've been asking the Lord for this, and thank you again for saying yes. You've just added so much strength to all of us, and now so many others who are going to hear this podcast. So, buddy, thank you. God bless you, and I'll see you soon. Huh?
Thank you, man. It's a pleasure and an honor.
Thanks, Wes.
See you, Wes.